Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The goddess next door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. One of my viewers asked me what advice would I give to Marvel's new editor-in-chief, Cebulski, on how to run Marvel Comics. And as the publisher of SJS Direct, I understand that there are a lot of different issues related to publishing, and studying Marvel Comics over the last 15 years, I see the areas that they need to work on if they hope to get Marvel Comics back to a place where it can be the industry leader. And one of the areas that Marvel has to work on first is leadership. Because when I look at Marvel Comics right now, it's an extremely fragmented organization. And the main reason why it's a fragmented organization is due to the ineffective leadership of Axel Alonso and Joe Quesada before him. Because when it comes down to both of these individuals, they just did not have the publishing experience to understand how the publishing business worked. So they did not know that you have to be able to bring all of the people working for you together and get all those people on the same page as related to publishing all of the books related to the Marvel Comics brand. Because when I look at Marvel Comics right now, Marvel Comics is a very fragmented organization. And the reason why I say it's a fragmented organization is because when I look at groups forming like this milkshake clique and people like Mark Waid just going off on tangents, it shows me that leadership in editorial is not making efforts to bring everybody together to be on the same page. And all of that not being on the same page shows on the page of Marvel Comics right now. Because when it comes down to Marvel Comics is inconsistent in the products it produces. And the reason why it's inconsistent in the products it produces is because editorial is not taking the lead over creative, and it's not taking the lead over establishing a standard for its products. And because there is no one leader at Marvel Comics, all of the comics coming out are inconsistent in terms of quality. And the second thing I would work on at Marvel Comics is establishing a social media policy, because one of the big problems at Marvel Comics right now, in addition to the leadership, is social media. Because many of these comic creators right now, they're creating a hostile environment on social media by attacking fans and attacking potential customers who make criticisms of their comics or have different political views and different political opinions. And one of the things I would come in from day one after I establish my leadership and get everyone on the same page is I'm going to establish a hard social media policy. Because when it comes down to the people who work at Marvel Comics, whether they be freelancers, editors, administrative assistants, they need to understand that they are working for Marvel Comics and they represent the Marvel Comics brand. When a comic artist or a comic writer works on a project, they no longer work for themselves as I see it. They work for Marvel Comics and they represent Marvel Comics when they are on social media, and their social media needs to reflect them working for this brand. Because as I see it, anyone who works for Marvel Comics should appreciate this opportunity, because Marvel Comics is supposed to be the industry leader. They're supposed to be the gold standard. And it's supposed to be an honor and a privilege to work at such a storied brand. And if someone wants to work at a storied brand, I believe that they need to change their behavior to show how much they appreciate the opportunity given to them. And when I see editors and artists and writers attacking people on social media, they show me they don't appreciate the opportunity given to them to work at such a storied brand. And the thing that I would do to deal with that is to establish a hard social media policy stating that there's certain standards for conduct when you are on social media. Because as I see it, if you are working for Marvel Comics, your passion should be for those comics And you should be so passionate about those comics that you want people to know you're working for Marvel Comics, and you want people to know what comics you're working on. Because if I were working for Marvel Comics right now and working on one of their characters, I would spend most of my time on Twitter and Facebook giving people teasers about stories, or I'd be posting up sample art, letting people know what is to come in future comics, because that's how you build anticipation for future comics, and that's how you build sales. Because when people see concept art or they see sample chapters of the story, that's what's going to get people excited to go pick up the next book. Because that's what I do on the SJS Direct imprint. I'm oftentimes, when I'm posting things on social media, I post up concept art for covers, or I'll post up a sample chapter. And the whole point of that is to get people excited to go out here and buy new books. And it has worked for me, because in 2016, when I was writing Spellbound, I posted several sample chapters of that novel, and it led to an increase in sales. Because what I did was I built up a buzz, I generated some heat, and that's what led to people getting excited about the book. In addition to that, I wound up doing promotional videos talking about different topics related to the book, and that got more people interested in buying the book. The whole point of social media is it can be a very effective advertising tool for comic creators and editors at Marvel Comics. Unfortunately, many are too busy being angry at Donald Trump or things going on in the media to think about using that social media platform as a way to go out here and market books to readers and potential new readers. Because when people see comic creators acting unprofessionally on social media, it gives people a negative perception of the comics and the people who produce comics. And that doesn't give people an incentive to go out here and buy comics. As I see it, people need to be using their social media to sell their next issue, not rant about the person who's in the White House right now. And the third thing I would be doing, in addition to establishing some leadership and establishing some sort of policy related to social media, is I'm desperately going to do a shakeup in editorial. Because as I see it right now, as it relates to Marvel Comics, there's a whole group of grossly unqualified people working in editorial right now. And these people show me how they are grossly unqualified by their behaviors on social media. Because if you have all this time to write anti-Trump rants, it shows me that you have no time to go here and work on the comics of the Marvel Comics brand. And I really, as an editor, if I was editor-in-chief, I would have no problem terminating these people, because clearly they're showing me they have absolutely no passion for Marvel Comics, the characters of the Marvel Comics brand, or the privilege of working at Marvel Comics. Because if you can sit there and spend your time on social media arguing with comic fans and writing anti-Trump rants, you show me that you're not really interested in comics, you're not interested in working in comics, and you're not interested in promoting comics. Because when it comes down to publishing, there are so many passionate people out here who would love an opportunity to work in comics. I would rather bring those people in to create a harmonic environment than to deal with toxic people who have no interest in comics and really want to be someplace else. As I see it, if you want to be in comics, you need to be working in comics. I mean, if you want to be here, you're going to show me you want to be here, and you're going to show me you want to be here based on your actions. And when I look at the behaviors of many of these people who are working at Marvel Comics right now in editorial, they really show me they have no real interest in working in comics. And the faster I get rid of those people, the better, it is for everyone at Marvel Comics. Because as I see it, the people who should be at Marvel Comics should be the people who love comics, the people who have been reading comics for years, and the people who know the characters, love the characters, and care about the characters. I myself have known a lot of these characters since I was 4 years old, and I've been reading comics for all my life. So I have a lot of passion for comics. And when I look at who's working there right now, a lot of these YA authors who know nothing about comics, they are really sucking the energy out of the room, and their negative energy is reflected on the pages of those comics, because I see a lot of comics that are really uninspired coming out these days, and I'm seeing a lot of comics with really bad storytelling in the pictures in these pages at Marvel Comics. And I believe it's time for those people to pack up their bags and find some other place to go and bring in some people who really love this industry, love this hobby, and love this craft, and want to show how much they love it by presenting that on the pages of a Marvel comic. Now, when it comes down to Marvel, and after the shakeup of editorial, I really want to establish some high standards for Marvel Comics, because Marvel Comics is supposed to be the industry leader. And as Diversity in Comics has said, Marvel is the health of the industry. And if Marvel is supposed to be the health of the industry, then Marvel needs to be the gold standard as related to comics. I even go past the gold standard. I say it needs to be the platinum standard as related to comics. And when it comes down to Marvel Comics, as I see it, creators need to step up their game if they want to be a part of Marvel Comics, and they want their comics published with the Marvel Comics logo on them. And when I look at Marvel Comics these days, I'm seeing a lot of creators who are not trying to elevate themselves. Because I look at Erica Henderson's sloppy work on Squirrel Girl, and it's really of poor quality. It's not, as I see it, something that is Marvel level quality. Yes, she has a nice style, but lately she has been producing work that is sloppy and uninspired. And when I look at a great artist like Chris Samney these days, he's been producing some really sloppy work as well. And I'm looking at a lot of these comics that are coming out of Marvel Comics, and they're far below the standard of what I would consider a great Marvel comic. Because after reading great Marvel comics by journeymen like Herb Trimpe and great legendary artists like George Perez, John Byrne, Jim Lee, and many others, I look at the comics produced today and they're far below par. And I really want to see standards raised as related to the art, and I also want to see standards raised as related to the story. Because when I look at the works of people today like Mark Waid and Ta-Nehisi Coates, they are far below the standard of what I would consider to be a Marvel level writer. When I look at the writing that is coming out of Marvel Comics right now, a lot of the comics coming out of Marvel, they're just poorly written. There's no execution of concept as related to story. There's no solid premise, and many of these stories are padded out to drag on and on instead of being structured for a 2-issue arc, a 3-issue arc, a 4-issue arc, or a 1-issue arc. And there's no real vision for an overreaching story arc for a creator's run these days, with the exception of a couple of people at Marvel Comics. And when I look at the creative side of it, again, I want to see some consistency as related to the publications, because when I take a look at the Jim Shooter era of Marvel Comics, one of the things that stuck out to me was that there were high standards as related to the art and the writing, and there was a consistency as related to the comics. Because when I look at the books that he produced in the 1970s and the 1980s, all those books, you could buy them all together and see a big picture as related to the Marvel Universe from a panoramic perspective. But when I look at Marvel Comics these days under Axel Alonso and now C.B. Cebulski, I'm not seeing things coming together to be consistent. Instead, I'm seeing, again, a fragmented Marvel Universe, and the reason why it's fragmented is because you have all these fragmented factions at Marvel Comics. And again, we need leadership to bring all those people together to understand that their role is to produce consistent quality publications that allow readers to pick up one book and enter the entire world of the Marvel Universe and have incentive to go out here and enter the world of the Marvel Universe. And looking at the publications produced by Marvel Comics, I really see a problem as related to that. And the big problem that they have at Marvel Comics as related to their catalog is that their catalog is just too big. I look at Marvel Comics right now, and there are just so many titles that it's overwhelming for even a veteran comic fan to get stay in this hobby, and it's even harder for a new reader to come into this hobby. And one of the things I really want to do if I were editor in chief at Marvel Comics is pare down that list, because when I look at a Marvel Comics that has over 80 publications, that's way too many books for a comic book publishing house to have on its front list. Because in publishing, you have three lists. You have a front list, which are all your A-list titles, which you are publishing regularly and are your lead titles. You have a mid list, which are second and third tier titles. And then you have a back list, which is all your trade paperbacks and your reprints. And when it comes down to Marvel Comics right now, they have a overstuffed mid list. And a lot of the books on the mid list, these are books that should have never been greenlit for publication. For example, when I take a look at Gail Simone's new Domino series, I saw a mid list book that is going to decline in sales almost rapidly, if it even gets any sales. And that shows me that someone in editorial is not really thinking about the business of publishing, because when it comes down to this Domino series, as I see it, I was looking at the book and I'm saying, what audience is this book targeting? What direction is this book going to go in a year or two? Because when you're a publisher, you don't just greenlit titles and put them out and hope that the books generate sales. Usually, when you're a seasoned publisher, you have core audiences you're going to target with your publications, and the goal of that is to minimize the losses on those new titles. And when I look at Marvel, I don't really see anybody thinking about minimizing losses as related to new titles, because when in the publishing industry for trade paper books, 90% of all books fail, and most publishers want to try to minimize that risk by trying to ensure that the best books, the 10%, are strong enough to cover the cost of the 90. When I look at Marvel right now, I don't see any sort of attempt to try to build a 10% list of books like X-Men, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, and pushing the A-list characters so that they can get strong sales, so that when they go out here and launch a high-risk book on a mid-list, they can take the losses on it if that book does not pan out for the audience. And this is a big problem at Marvel as related to their business decisions, as related to their catalog. Again, they have way too many titles that they're launching, and they're not launching their titles with any sort of business strategy or marketing strategy. And an example of that to me is Unstoppable Wasp, which came out last year. Here we have another book that is launching with a lower tier character, and they're launching a book with a lower tier character that is a brand new version of the character. No one knew who Hope Van Dyne was, and no one had a reason to care because of the sloppy execution of concept. As Chuck Dixon has stated about introducing new characters, he says that you have to build a new character up in an existing series. And I didn't see that done with Unstoppable Wasp. They just brought out this Hope Van Dyne character and then just stuck her in a series, and then they didn't execute on, in addition to not executing on concept, they did not give you a reason to care about this character, because she had no enemies, she had no rogues, she had no challenges to overcome, and that didn't give readers an incentive to go out and buy the character. And that was one of the core reasons why that book failed, and that's a core reason why many books are struggling and many books fail, is because when it comes down to leadership at Marvel, they really don't treat the publishing business like a business. And that's why I say that the catalog needs to be pared down to about 16 titles and 8 or 9 limited series, because when it comes down to making comics accessible for regular readers and new readers, the fewer amount of books that are out there increase the value of those books to the readers, and that increases demand for those new books. So when you have over 80, 90 books, that doesn't give readers an incentive to go out here and buy comics because they are so overwhelmed by all the choices, they start losing interest in comics. So what I want to do, if I were the editor-in-chief of Marvel, is pare down Marvel's list to about 16 regular monthly series and about 8 limited series for the year. As I see it, working at Marvel Comics is a privilege, and working to produce Marvel Comics should be an honor, and you should be wanting to earn your way towards working on a Marvel comic. And that's the way I see it as related to Marvel Comics. And paring down the list establishes a high standard, and it also motivates people to be passionate about the work that they produce because they are knowing that there aren't that many Marvel comics being produced, and the opportunity to work on a Marvel comic is a privilege and an honor. And they're going to try to step up their game to improve the quality of the books that they produce at Marvel Comics. And that's something I would want to see done as related to Marvel's catalog. Because again, as I look at their catalog right now, it's just got way too many mid-list books. And those mid-list books, they are dying on the vine. The America Chavez's, the Unstoppable Wasps, the Dominoes, and many Ms. Marvel and many of these other books, they just don't meet the standard for Marvel Comics, and the quality of the work produced in those Marvel Comics is just far below par. And if I were editor-in-chief, a lot of those books would just wind up getting cut because they're just not on what I consider the Marvel Comics standard. As I see it, the Marvel Comics standard needs to be higher, and it needs to be something that Stan Lee could look at and be proud of. Because when I look at the comics Marvel's producing right now, they are far below the standard of what Stan Lee produced back in the comic book slump era of the 1950s, and way below the silver age of Marvel Comics. Now, in addition to paring down that list, I really want to do something about distribution, because one of the big problems with the comic book industry, as I see it, is the archaic distribution system. Diamond Comics has had a monopoly on distribution for the last 20 years. And over the last 20 years, it's just comics have not been able to grow and expand with Diamond's distribution. And one of the things that I believe that comics desperately need to do is they need to understand that the direct market has gone as about as far as it has possibly gone, and it's time to start thinking about introducing other distributors like the Hudson Group into the mix for comics. And the only way we're going to get distributors like the Hudson Group and others to come in, like Hatchet, is to bring back returnability. And one of the things I want to see the comic industry do if I were an editor-in-chief is focus on making comics returnable again. Because if we make comics returnable again, that opens up the marketplace, of retail at drugstores, supermarkets, Walmart, Target, and other retailers out there. And the whole thing with returnability is it opens up new marketplaces, and it allows us to access a whole new audience of readers. Because one of the core reasons why the comic book industry has not grown is due to the fact that the industry is not, nobody sees the Marvel comics because the Marvel comics aren't in places people are. And retailers don't want to stock anything without returnability. And I believe returnability is a good thing because it gives comic publishers like Marvel an indicator to what's actually selling and shows us what is selling in real time, because returned books show the publisher what actually sold. And what comic publishers right now are focusing on with Comic-Con primarily is orders. And I really don't want to focus on orders because in trade publishing, nobody focuses on orders because orders don't actually mean sales. Sales are what drive the publishing business. And if a book isn't selling, that book usually winds up being discontinued in 6 months in trade publishing. And as I see it, with the comic publishers, they need to focus on sales. And this is one of the things that it would be the core foundation of my vision for Marvel Comics, from editorial to the artists on social media, is focusing hard on sales. Because when I'm on social media, I focus hard on sales. That's what I focus on when I make videos. That's what I focus on when I go on social media like Twitter and Facebook. I'm primarily promoting every day and trying to get people excited for the books, because a publisher's main goal is to get more sales and to increase sales. And as I see it right now, Marvel's sales are absolutely unacceptable. I mean, books that sell 20,000 is not a number I aspire for. What I aspire for are books, especially A-list books like X-Men, Spider-Man, and Iron Man, doing at least 100,000 minimum and pushing forward, because if these characters are so popular in the movies, they need to be just as popular on the stands as related to comic sales. I want to see these books break 100,000 and start shooting towards the 200,000 mark of the 1980s. Now, a lot of people would say that's being unrealistic, but when I look at how popular these characters are and how they have endured, that number should be something we should have. I mean, if these characters are making hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office, then they need to be making hundreds of thousands of sales in not only comic shops, but in retailers across the country. And for comics to have sales this poor, that really shows me that there's nobody at Marvel Comics right now who has the vision to get comics in the hands of all those potential comic fans in the 21st century. And it's a shame that that opportunity was missed, because these characters are making billions of dollars in movies and merchandise sales, but they're not getting new readers to come out and pick up the comics. And that's due to, again, the editorial at Marvel having no vision and having no leadership. If I were the leader, I would be focusing on trying to increase the sales of comics to new readers, and I would be focused on trying to connect new readers to it, because this is, as I see it, the opportunity of a lifetime. And because so many people are writing rants about Donald Trump on social media, they don't see that they're missing the opportunity to reach an entire generation of new readers and reconnect them to comics. Now, one of the other things I would focus on as editor-in-chief, in addition to dealing with the distribution issues, is helping out all those comic shops out there. And 50 comic shops closed last year, and Marvel lost 10% of its market share due to the inept leadership of Axel Alonso and the mismanagement of Marvel Comics' incompetent editorial staff. And a lot of those comic shops, a lot of those shops could have been saved had Marvel Comics been producing a lot of quality publications. As Diversity in Comics has stated, Marvel is the health of the industry, and Marvel right now is killing comic shops with horrible storylines like Secret Empire and sloppy work like Mark Waid has produced in Captain America and many other titles like The Champions and The Avengers. And that, to me, is unacceptable. So I would like to help comic shops out by not only increasing the standards for Marvel Comics, but also offering returnability to them as well. Because as I see it, it's just not fair for comic shops to have to sit on stacks of unsold inventory. Because I know a lot of these comic shops, these guys, they're working hard every day, and they have to go out here and order these comics, and whatever doesn't sell, they're stuck with. And they have to take losses on every book that winds up in the dollar bin, the 50-cent bin, and the quarter bin. And as I see it, they shouldn't have to take losses on those books. If those books aren't selling, then they should be able to ship them back for credit on next month's issues. And the publisher should eat the costs on those books. And if those books aren't selling, that gives the publisher incentive to pull the plug on those books and cancel them. And that sends a message to these creative teams out here that they can't publish any old title and then expect it to just be put on the shelf of a comic shop. And I'd also like to give comic shops the option of ordering a la carte, meaning that if they feel a book isn't selling, they shouldn't have to order that book or feel compelled to order that book, because if something isn't selling, they shouldn't have it on their shelf space. I understand that shelf space in a retailer is extremely limited, and I understand that shelf space is something that you earn by going out here and producing quality work. And that's something that a lot of Marvel creators have taken for granted, and that's why they're producing such sloppy books like Squirrel Girl, because they believe that they are entitled to a space on a comic shelf. And I believe that you need to earn your space on a comic shelf if you're going to work in comics. And I believe that your books need to be up to a certain standard if you want to work in comics. And I believe you need to step up your game if you hope to produce quality comics at a company like Marvel. Again, if this is the gold standard, you need to bring yourself up to the level of the gold standard. And the comic shop, if they're going to take niche titles or special titles, they need to see books that are up to the gold standard. That gives the shop owner incentive to order, and it also builds buzz in the industry, and it also builds buzz with not only veteran readers, but it builds buzz with new readers. And again, this is all about establishing standards, because as I see it right now, there aren't really any standards at Marvel Comics. And because there's no gold or platinum standard at Marvel Comics, what's happening right now is I'm seeing a lot of people producing poor quality comics and believing they have a right to do so. And I looked at a comic Yellow Flash posted on Twitter, and I just saw such poor quality that it took me back to the old black and white days of the 1980s, and all those indie publishers who just decided they just felt like they wanted to make a comic, but the comics were some of these comics are so bad, they show me they have no place in a comic shop, and they have no place anywhere with this industry. Now, another thing I really want to do with Marvel Comics, if I were running Marvel Comics, is I would love to bring in some veterans back into the industry, because as I see it, Marvel has not really done a good job helping out the veteran creators out here. When I look at guys who have really helped build this industry, like Bill Messner-Loebs, David Michelini, and many others, I believe that those are the guys who should be in editorial right now, and they should be mentoring all this young talent from these so-called YA groups who are grossly unqualified. And the reason why I believe that they need to be in leadership positions is because these guys are seasoned comic creators. They know how to meet a deadline, and they know the characters, they know the craft, and they're sitting on the sidelines, and we have all these inexperienced people working in the industry when they need to be working in editorial, teaching and mentoring the next generation of comic creators. And one of the things I would do if after I shook up editorial is go out here and try to recruit those guys to be a part of the editorial team and have them try to help rebuild the structure of Marvel Comics and try to establish a standard for Marvel Comics that is on the same level of Stan Lee and meets the mission that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby established all those years ago when they established the Marvel Universe as we know it today. Because as I see it right now, the veterans, they're sitting on the sidelines when they need to be in the bullpen. And the reason why they need to be in the bullpen is to keep these characters consistent and to show people what's great about these characters, and to try to teach a lot of these young people that their brand new ideas really need to be vetted, because they really don't understand this publishing business. And one of the things I would love to do is reach back for many of those old veteran creators, because these are the guys who went out here and created some of the greatest characters in the Marvel Universe, created some of the greatest stories in the Marvel Universe, and I believe the greatest way to pay respect to those men and women is to offer them an opportunity to work in editorial, helping to keep these characters consistent and to mentor a lot of these newer, younger creators on the craft of comic book creation. And when it comes down to bringing in new talent, I see a lot of great talent in the comics, but I don't see them working at comic publishers like Marvel, DC, Image, or Dynamite, or any of the other Dark Horse. What I see is a lot of comic creators who have become frustrated, and they've left the whole idea of working in comics to go work in web comics or to create self-publications like Diversity in Comics and Jawbreaker's graphic novel. And I see so much talent out there, and as I see it, it's time to bring some of that talent into the pool for Marvel Comics. And one of the things I would do if I were editor-in-chief is I would try to recruit a lot of this great talent I've seen out here working the cons in the art rooms for commissions. A lot of those writers who I've seen out there, you know, putting their work up self-published, a lot of these web comic guys out here, I would be trying to recruit that talent for to create the next generation of Marvel Comics. When I see people like Bill Walko from the Hero Business, Mike Williams who does the Deke Sledge strip, R.K. Milholland who does something positive, and many others, I see their work. I really would love to recruit that talent to work in a place like Marvel Comics because I believe that these creators they would have the passion, the heart, the enthusiasm, and their energy would create positive energy in the Marvel offices, and it would also create positive energy on the pages of Marvel Comics because these people have shown me they have great passion for comics, they care about comics, they love comics, and I would want to bring those people in. I mean, I look at Diversity in Comics Jawbreakers and I look at the panels that he has written and the artist John Millen has drawn up, and it's a rock solid story. And that's the kind of guy I would also want to bring in to work at my Marvel Comics because those are the kind of guys who love comics. They want to be here. They care about comic books, and they really want to produce quality comics. So I would love to bring those creators in to work at Marvel Comics because they've shown me with on their pages that they can produce quality work consistently. And when it comes down to diversity, I would like to make an effort to try to reach out to many of the qualified Black, Latino, and Asian creators out there. I mean, when I look again at people like Chris Miller and Mike Williams, who creates a Deke Sledge strip, and Just Some Guy, I look at their artwork, and again, I see talented creators of color who I want to bring in to a Marvel Comics. And these were guys, again, who I believe who would appreciate the opportunity given to them to work at Marvel Comics, and they would try to take the characters to the next level as they took their craft to the next level. So when I look at comics, when diversity, I want to bring in a lot of top qualified talent. And these are people who have shown on the pages of their work that they can craft a solid story as related to script, and people who could go out of their way to create great panels that are very dynamic and inspired. And I believe that these are the areas that Marvel Comics desperately needs to work on. And if I were C.B. Cebulski, I would be working on those areas. And if I were the editor-in-chief at Marvel, this would be my vision for rebuilding Marvel Comics because as the editor-in-chief, I would see myself as someone who was a diplomat to the comic fans, an ambassador of the brand to the general public, and someone who is looking to build bridges to the Marvel brand, the Marvel characters, and building bridges and connecting people to these characters and what makes them great, because my ultimate goal as an editor-in-chief at Marvel would be to make comics great again and make comics great reading for readers of all ages all across this world. If you'd like to try some of my SJS direct publications and see what's great about them, you can click the link to Amazon.com And there you will be taken to see the books of the ISIS series, the Eastern series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.